All right. Well, good evening. So tonight we're going to be talking about MN 138, the exposition of a summary. And we're going to be going over the progress of the meditation through the first jhana, through awakening. And as we talk about the path like that, I want to say one of the nice things about the suttas is we have a clear outline of what we expect might happen in practice. We know how it might look and how it might go wrong. And when we see it not matching up with, as we hope it will, as if it's not matching the map quite right, or we seem to be off in the weeds a little bit, that gives us help and know we can change our technique or change our approach or reconsider how we're working with this. A problem with the maps, though, is the maps are not the territory by any means. The suttas talk about the unconditioned. They talk about moving beyond symbols and moving beyond language. And they use language in order to try to do this. And this works reasonably well. However, it can be quite confusing as we start learning about that. And as you know, with any map, when you look at the map, you don't have the experience of being there. You can read a map or read a description of a trail going to a lookout, to a view, and it can be wonderfully written and clearly written, and it will not give you the actual experience of going up the trail and going to the lookout yourself. And in fact, when you actually do that yourself, you may be surprised and may have a completely different idea of what you thought was going to happen. So I just want to say that as we are going to talk about the progress of the jhanas and how it can look. Some of the things we project on a map like this are expectations. One, that it is something that is not attainable or very far from where we're at. The first time we hear about it, it can seem that way. But as we tread the path ourselves, we find it feels very normal. It feels, maybe the first couple of times we go to a place, it can be very exciting. But after a while, it's common sense. It's how it works. It's our normal experience. And so if these things feel or sound far out and are far from you right now, I just want to assure you that they are not necessarily the case. So, let's start. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Sawati in Jeta's Grove, Anathempindika's park. There the Blessed One addressed the monks thus. Monks, Venerable Sir, they replied, the Blessed One said this. Monks, I shall teach you a summary and an exposition. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the monks replied. The Blessed One said this. So the Buddha taught in several different styles in his discourses. Sometimes he would start with a theme and have a long exposition and talk about the theme and a simile, perhaps to reinforce it, and then even repeat the thesis at the end in a very structured way, laying things out step by step in great detail. And sometimes he would simply say a verse, maybe a poem, or a short statement. And he would leave it for the monks and his students to try and figure it out. And this was done, as I was saying, to help people understand the Dhamma. The Dhamma is beyond language and symbols. And there is a limitation with our language of what we can actually say about it. It's a straightforward experience, the things that are talked about here. However, our language kind of traps us if you haven't thought about it. We have a certain set of words that we use, a certain set of symbols, and they line up, and we use them, and we don't notice what they do not talk about. And the things they do not talk about, we have no way of accessing, right? Because they're not in our usual set of symbols that we think and speak in. An advantage of keeping Pali is this is closer, the closer language to what the Buddha used. And there are concepts that can be encoded in Pali that we simply do not have in English. And so it is still language, it's still symbolic, and it still cannot capture Nibbana, cannot by definition. But as we understand, there are things that we cannot say in words. We have to understand ourselves. We have to hold the words in our mind, toss them about, forget about them, have them come back until we have a breakthrough and we see what they're really saying sometimes. And so this is what the Buddha was doing in many of the cases when he was saying a poem and walking away, or saying a verse and walking away. And so this is an example of that. Monks, a monk should examine things in such a way that while he's examining them, his consciousness is not distracted and scattered externally, nor stuck internally. And by not clinging, he does not become agitated. If his consciousness is not distracted and scattered externally, nor stuck internally, and if by not clinging he does not become agitated, then for him there is no origination of suffering, of birth, aging, and death in the future. And so this short statement might have a solution to the whole problem that the Buddha was trying to explain to us. And the problem, we can talk about the teachings of the Buddha in a couple of formulas. One of the most common is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are, the first truth is, there is suffering. Sometimes it's said, life is suffering, or everything is suffering, or something like that. There is suffering. Suffering exists, as you all have probably noticed. And if it was all suffering, why would we be here? There would be no point, because it would all be suffering. So there exists a problem of suffering. There exists a cause of suffering. And this is taken at a couple different directions in the suttas, but a good summary is craving. The cause of suffering is craving. Craving, the Pali word is tanha, can be translated as thirst. And so it has an aspect of wanting something, desiring something. It has an aspect of tightening around. When craving manifests in your body and your mind, it always manifests with tension and tightness in your head and your body. The tension and tightness in your head and your body when your mind is distracted, that is a manifestation of craving. As your mind is pulled away from that open, spacious awareness with your loving kindness object, pulled into a distraction, it tightens around the distraction. Your head tightens, your body tightens, your awareness tightens and shrinks around it. That's the movement of craving. As this movement happens, the illusion of I is created. We can also talk about craving as I like it or I don't like it. It's the movement from a painful or pleasant feeling into my pain. I want that pleasure. There's a difference between pain and suffering. And the difference between a pain arising and being there and suffering because of the pain is taking it personally and the manifestation of craving. Again, it's a tension and tightness in the body, or a tightening of your awareness around the sensation. After your awareness tightens around it to some degree, you start clinging to it. Start thinking about it. Have more thoughts about it, have plans about it. And before long, we're far gone from our object of meditation. Meditation is useful because we can look at this process in a very controlled way. But this is the same process that happens when we don't have the object of meditation as our reference point. Something arises, painful or pleasant. We react, we take it personally, we start trying to control it in some way, push it away, keep it here, start clinging, and we're gone. Or I should say I is born, one of the two, however you look at it. So this short statement is talking about a way of holding attention that's not scattered externally, not stuck internally, that allows one to be aware, yet not is craving and clinging, not becoming agitated. And when you are holding your attention in that way, in that space there is no origination of suffering. That's what those words say. What do they mean? I think it takes a little more thinking, yeah. So this is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Sublime One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling. Then soon after the Blessed One has gone, the monks considered, now friends, the Blessed One has risen from his seat and gone to his dwelling after giving a summary in brief without expounding the detailed meaning. Now who will expound this in detail? They considered, the Venerable Maha Kaccana is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his wise companions in the holy life. He is capable of expounding the detailed meaning. Suppose we went to him and asked the meaning of this. So the monks, instead of thinking about it or asking the Buddha, went to Maha Kaccana. But that's okay, that's what Maha Kaccana does. So Maha Kaccana, he's one of the great disciples of the Buddha. We actually don't see him in too many suttas. He lived far away from where the Buddha usually was staying, in a remote country, so he wasn't around the greater Sangha a lot of the time. Maha Kaccana was known for, well, he was the chief disciple in the expositions of what was said in brief. So that's what the Buddha recognized in him. And he was known for a very intelligent and systematic mind. In fact, it's thought some of the sutta analysis systems we use today were devised originally by Maha Kaccana to some degree. When you see his suttas, they're all very methodical, very precise, usually precisely about how the sense doors and the mind operates, and very clear. So that's who Maha Kaccana was. Then the monks went to the Venerable Maha Kaccana and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, they sat down to one side, and they told him what had taken place, adding, "Let the Venerable Maha Kaccana expound it to us." The Venerable Maha Kaccana replied, "Friends, it is as though a man needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood, thought that heartwood should be sought for among the branches and leaves of a great tree standing possessed of heartwood, after he had passed over the root and the trunk. So it is with you, venerable sirs, that you think I should be asked about the meaning of this after you pass the Blessed One by, when we were face to face with the teacher. For knowing, the Blessed One knows. Seeing, he sees. He has vision. He has knowledge. He is the Dhamma. He is the Holy One. He is the sayer, the proclaimer, the elucidator of meaning, the giver of the deathless, the Lord of the Dhamma, the Tathagata. That was the time when you should have asked the Blessed One the meaning. As he told you, so you should have remembered it. Surely, friend Kaccana, knowing the Blessed One knows, seeing he sees, he is vision, he is the Tathagata. That was the time when we should have asked the Blessed One the meaning. As he told us, so we should have remembered. Yet the Venerable Maha Kaccana is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his wise companions in the holy life. The Venerable Maha Kaccana is capable of expounding the detailed meaning of this summary given in brief by the Blessed One, without expounding the detailed meaning. Let the Venerable Maha Kaccana expound it without finding it troublesome. Then listen, friends, and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, friend, the monks replied. The Venerable Maha Kaccana said this. How, friends, is consciousness called distracted and scattered externally? Here, when a monk has seen a form with the eye, if his consciousness follows after the sign of the form, is tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the form, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the form, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. And that is another way of describing the distraction process. When a form arises and you look at it, if you crave it, if there is craving for this, pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling, if you seek gratification in it, either through the pleasant feeling or getting away from the unpleasant feeling or ignoring the neither pleasant nor pleasant feeling, then you become distracted and scattered by it. It pulls you in, you start thinking about it, first a thought, then another thought, and then you're pulled away. As simple as that. What pulls you in? Your underlying tendency for gratification. We can talk about these in terms of the three poisons. That's a dramatic name. The three poisons are lust, aversion, hatred, and delusion. The underlying tendency of lust, when that is present, we tend to be attracted and drawn into a pleasant feeling. When the underlying tendency for aversion is present, we tend to be averse and push away from an unpleasant feeling, a painful feeling. And when the underlying tendency for delusion is present, we tend to ignore a neither painful nor pleasant feeling. So, when he has heard a sound with the ear, if his consciousness follows after the sign of the sound, is tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the sound, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the sound, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. If when he has smelt an odor with the nose, if his consciousness follows after the sign of the odor, is tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the odor, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the odor, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has tasted a flavor with the tongue, if his consciousness follows after the sign of the flavor, is tied and shackled by the gratification in the sign of the flavor, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the flavor, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has touched a tangible with the body, if his consciousness follows after the sign of the tangible, is tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the tangible, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the tangible, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has cognized a mind object with the mind, if his consciousness follows after the sign of the mind object, is tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the mind object, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the mind object, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. So this is describing a distraction process in each of the 6 sense doors. The 6 sense doors is another classification for all of our experience. All of our experience arises in one of the sense doors. So we have sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, our 5 primary senses, and then the mind sense door, which is everything else. The mind sense door operates just like the other sense doors do. The distraction process is ultimately the same, although we can be a little more detailed in mind objects. There's a lot more to talk about than just a single mind object. It's not like an odor that's pleasant or painful, or neither pleasant nor painful. Mind objects, of course, can be more complex. But also, we can think of them as a pleasant mind object, an unpleasant mind object, and so on. And the complexity with this, with mind objects, is a bit of a rabbit hole as well. There's whole books written about this, like the Abhidhamma, different characterizations of mind objects and how they work, different theories around this. And while this can be very interesting, there's only so much proliferation about how the mind works that's necessary for awakening. And it's the more we proliferate about things like that, sometimes we have theories that may or may not be useful, like that. So it's not necessary to go into incredible detail about how your mind works, like that. You know, a mind object arises, a memory arises, you know exactly how that goes. Your mind goes to it. You think about it, you like it, you dislike it. You think more about it. And before long, you're having more and more thoughts, and you're lost. And how, friends, is consciousness not distracted and scattered externally? Here, when a monk has seen a form with the eye, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of the form, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the form, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the form, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. So, that's a pretty remarkable statement, that one can observe forms and not be scattered by them. So in this case, the underlying tendency for lust of a pleasant form is not active. You have been mindful. Perhaps you're looking at a flower, you pick it up, you look at it. If you're not mindful, before long, you're enjoying it, you're looking at it, and you're thinking about, oh, this flower, I've seen a flower like that. Oh gosh, I wonder if I could grow a flower like this. Oh, that little bug, is it good for the flower or bad for the flower? And before long, you're not seeing the flower in front of you. If you pick the flower up and you look at it right there and you notice and you siksar and relax, you have a chance of seeing the flower without proliferating about it. And as the proliferation starts, you can siksar again. You have addressed the underlying tendency for lust for the flower. The underlying tendency for lust, hatred, and delusion causes a great deal of problems. They are habits we have been reinforcing for a very long time until we encounter some kind of sense door training. However, every time we siksar in the face of distraction, we are changing the habit of the underlying tendency there. What your habits are, what you tend to do is the inclination of your mind. And if you intend and tend to siksar and be present, your inclination of mind is to do that. Early in sense door training, you find yourself lost, and you siksar and you come back. As you progress further, this becomes more and more automatic. In your meditation, a distraction comes up and you can catch it earlier, you relax and you come back. It happens faster and easier and simpler, to the point it becomes automatic. Whatever happens, your mind immediately lets go of and allows to be there. And with time, this can be your day-to-day experience walking around, not proliferating on the things you see, not thinking, not getting lost. Just quite naturally, because of your habit, whatever comes up, you let go right there. That is possible. And as this goes on over time, you can eradicate the underlying tendency for lust, hatred, and delusion with practice and with leaps of insight and awakening. When he has heard a sound with his ear, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of the sound, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the sound, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the sound, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. When he has smelt an odor with the nose, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of the odor, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the odor, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the odor, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. When he has tasted a flavor with the tongue, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of the flavor, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the flavor, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the flavor, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. And so I've noticed there's some repetition here. The repetition is on purpose. It's on purpose so you can remember it. It's on purpose so you can follow along and see if you can do what the sutta says while it's being read. Suttas, many of them, most of them, are like guided meditations. When you can follow along the instructions, your mind can look deeper in what is being written there. Some suttas are almost exclusively like this, often around this kind of wording, describing the sensual operation and working with it. So when there's repetition in suttas, I'd encourage you to pay close attention and not tune it out, even though it's the same thing over and over again. That's the tendency of our minds and brains. When something repeats, we stop paying attention because it doesn't seem important. But with the suttas, it is important and it's repeated on purpose. When he has touched a tangible with the body, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of the tangible, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the tangible, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the tangible, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. When he has heard, when he has cognized a mind object with the mind, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of the mind object, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of the mind object, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the mind object, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. And so that is how you do not allow your consciousness to be scattered and distracted externally. You 6R. And how, friends, is the mind called stuck internally? Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and examining thought, with joy and happiness born of seclusion. If his consciousness follows after the joy and happiness born of seclusion, it is tied and shackled by gratification in the joy and happiness born of seclusion. Then his mind is called stuck internally. So when you are entering a jhana and joy arises, it clearly says, do not attend to the joy. Do not put your mind on the joy and the happiness. That will have you be stuck internally. And if you do that, you can find that it may be a static thing, that it may be stable, and then you can be very stable on the joy that doesn't change. But it doesn't change. And you're not seeing how things are working. You're stuck internally. And that is not how you perceive by not clinging. That is consciously being stuck internally. And with that, there is origination of suffering of birth, aging, and death in the future. Yeah? Not how to work with your jhana. However, you know what he will say. How is the mind called not stuck internally? Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and examining thought, with joy and happiness born of seclusion. If his consciousness does not follow after the joy and pleasure born of seclusion, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the joy and pleasure born of seclusion, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the joy and pleasure born of seclusion, then his mind is called not stuck internally. So this is talking about entering jhana in a way where the mind is not stuck on the joy and happiness. Again, 6Ring to enter the jhana. So when we enter jhana, you are quite secluded from sensual pleasures. Sensual pleasures refers to the sense door operation. So you're quite secluded as much as possible from the operation of your sense doors. From sight, you close your eyes, you don't move, not many smells in the meditation hall, not many tastes. There are some sounds, yeah, those are hard to seclude. And your thoughts, and you're left watching what happens. Quite secluded. As you're meditating, a distraction arises. Sound of a lawnmower, a memory of a past, something comes up and pulls your attention. Your attention can seek gratification in that, right? You have craving for it. I like it. I dislike it. I wish I wasn't thinking of that. If only I said something different there. You start thinking and proliferating around it until you 6R and let go of that attachment. So what causes a mind to go to any particular sense door operation? Why do you get stuck on a memory or a sound? And why are you not getting fixated on the feeling of the chair the feeling of your floor? Now you will, now that I mention it, but in general you don't. It's because of the attachment you have. Attachment to it is what pulls your attention to it. When you 6R the distraction, you let go of a certain amount of attachment. You starve it of a certain amount of attention. And without the nutriment of attention, your distraction will start to wither away. With time, quickly, or with multiple iterations of going back and forth and 6Ring, the distraction will go away and evaporate. When that happens, there's relief that arises, a weight off your shoulders, a relief in the body and mind. And a joy, a happiness and joy born of seclusion arises in the body. Your fake smile becomes a real smile, a toothy grin. The joy can be quite pleasant, quite exciting, but we don't attend to it. We attend to the object of meditation. Whatever arises in our meditation, we observe loving kindness. Everything else is a distraction. We 6R that and let that go. And as this happens, of course, loving kindness is stronger, and mind settles down and becomes more still. As it settles down, less is happening. We see small little movements here or there, not so much. And the joy eventually, sooner or later, fades into contentment in the body. And with our sharp mind, we may notice we are pulled to those little or smaller thoughts, yeah? The ones we can finally see. Sometimes when we first enter a jhana, a new one, it seems like everything is perfectly quiet. Like, whew, very still, silence finally. But the longer you're there, the more you realize there are some imperfections in it. There is some movement. And there will be movement all the way down. And as you become more aware of that movement, which maybe you didn't see right away, you can 6R that. And as it pulls your attention, you relax and let it go. Same process repeats. Eventually, you let go of enough attachment that mind goes deeper into the second jhana. The second jhana has different and stronger kind of joy in the body arise. The body may feel very, very light. Loving kindness may be stronger. So it's a combination of lighter yet stronger joy. Interesting. And mind becomes very quiet. And words here go away. You can have some words in the first jhana. In the second jhana, words are far too clunky, awkward. They cause a headache. They cause tension. And so if you find yourself here and you're using a verbal wish, let go of the verbal wish. Just bring up loving kindness and remind yourself. And this will be no problem at this stage. Loving kindness is generally very strong and easy to attend to. This is called the beginning of noble silence. The second jhana has a nice confidence to it too. The first time or two you enter jhana, and it's the first time you've ever done that, well, it's the first time or two. It's new. By the time you're entering the second jhana, you know how it works, and it happens consistently. And there's a certain confidence about it that happens and you can rely on. As you go deeper, that joy becomes too coarse. That very wonderful, strong joy becomes a little clunky, just like words became too clunky. Believe it or not, joy, it's nicer to be just calm and happy in your body than strong joy. If you don't believe me, check it out. It's a fun experiment. But this is a surprise for people in this stage because the joy that they're so confident in, it's coming up with, usually there is suddenly gone. And they're like, well, what's wrong? The strong joy is gone. Until you hear this, it's like, oh no, I'm not meditating well. I'm doing something wrong. And so they just consider, is mind more stable and comfortable than it has ever been before? Is body incredibly comfortable? Are you sitting there very comfortably, peacefully in your body? Yeah, it's better. The third jhana, on account of which noble ones announce, he has a pleasant abiding who has equanimity and is mindful. That's the only jhana that there is that phrase where it's praised for being so nice to be in, is the third jhana, interestingly. You have a lot of equanimity, happiness in mind, and you're, and like that, no strong joy, just calm steadiness of mind. And your body sensations start to disappear at this point. At first, maybe you notice your hands are missing for a period of time, or you can't quite figure out where your feet are, or your legs are gone. This is how it starts. This starts not because you're suppressing the experience of your body. It starts because you're letting go of attachment to the sensations of your body, and your mind doesn't bother going to them. This is a characteristic of the third jhana, that you start losing parts and sensation of the body. And this is actually a nice characteristic, a nice trick about it. At first, when you enter jhana, it's maybe a little brittle, maybe a little tricky. It only happens when you're meditating. You have to really let go and really do it just right and allow it to happen without trying. As this happens more and more and you develop mastery in the jhanas, and you maybe do the jhana mastery practices, which we'll talk about later in the retreat, you can just enter a jhana with the snap of a finger. And this means you can turn off the sensation in your body or a hand with the snap of a finger with skill. A very useful thing to have when you have an injury or something happens, to have this kind of control of mind. This is very possible to do this with jhana mastery. And there's reports of monks going through root canals, going through surgery, that have strong jhana mastery that can do that and not and do it okay without anesthesia. In fact, Bhante was famous for having several root canals, not just one. Well, I think he's famous for this, and not having anesthesia. Doing it once is one thing. Doing it a second time is another. And that is what he did. Wow. So, after the third jhana, as you go deeper and let more of what's present there go, you start losing all body sensation. Even the happiness goes away. And there's a stability of mind that does not move to pleasant or unpleasant. Pain or pleasure does not make it shake in the slightest. It's remarkable the first couple of times you experience this. Doesn't matter. The equanimity is that strong. And you lose full sensation of your body except for points of contact and maybe the top of your head. And so, sitting there mindful, deep calm, stability, and not really feeling your body. But you can feel your body. If someone taps you on the shoulder, you'll feel it. If a wind goes across a room, the hairs on your arm will light up just fine and then go away. You have the capacity to feel if you need to. But otherwise, you're calm without body sensation, deep equanimity. And because of this, the sensation of loving kindness can no longer be in the center of your chest. Even if you're even as you start to approach the fourth jhana, the sensation of loving kindness will naturally move from your chest to your head. It does it all on its own. It can be a surprise, but it will go up and we'll just want to hang out there. So if that starts happening, don't push it back. Don't try to push it up there either. That's not going to work. But if it wants to go up, let it be up there and start radiating from your head. As you get familiar with this, sometimes it will want to go back to your chest and sometimes it will go to your head, and that's okay. Let it do what it wants, but probably it's going to feel best to radiate it from your head. With this great stability of mind and equanimity, we're now prepared to radiate to other beings besides our spiritual friend. And this is when the practice opens up. And we start doing what's called breaking down the barriers, which is radiating to more spiritual friends, family members, neutral people, and difficult people. People that have been difficult in your lives. You actually can radiate to them without a problem. This is one of the goals of practice, is to be able to be generous with our minds with anyone, no matter what. No matter who they are, no matter what we think of them, they are human beings. And we can radiate them loving kindness without hesitation, believe it or not. Yeah. And as we can do that and we go through our enemies, then we radiate in all directions. Sometimes you meet a new difficult person and then you can learn to radiate to them too later on. Usually that's a very easy process at this point, believe it or not, with the amount of equanimity and mind training you have. Sure, there's some challenging people we have to work with, but it's often very, very possible, very quickly. So as we radiate from our head, we radiate in all directions. And it naturally flows from our head. And it starts to change from a feeling of loving kindness to a feeling of compassion. So loving kindness is part of 4 energies that we develop through this meditation. There is loving kindness, which we start with, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And we naturally transition through these, just like we naturally transition through the jhanas. The sensation will change all on its own. We don't need to make it happen. It's just going to naturally change into compassion. And as it changes into compassion, which is a different feeling with different characteristics, then a sense of expansion sets in. As we expand easily out and out and out. The next 4 jhanas are called the arupa jhanas, or formless jhanas, because we don't have a common feeling of our body. Our body tends to be not present, though it can be present in these if we need it to be. It is gone for the most part. The first arupa jhana, and we think of these as aspects of the 4th jhana. So that's not like they're different jhanas. They're really just different layers of the 4th jhana. We can think of it that way. So you may hear there's only 4 jhanas, and in a way that's true. And there's also more. There's more like 8 or 9, depending how you say it. So the first arupa jhana is called infinite space, or boundless space, or limitless space, something like that. It's characterized by compassion moving outwards. So as we start to enter this, we go out and out. We can fill the room, fill the meditation center, fill the meditation grounds, fill the state, fill the country, fill the world. Easily, unbounded, flows outward. And we can fill more. Infinite space is like that. No center, always moving outward. Compassion. After a time, the joy will transition, or the compassion will transition into joy, which again feels different than compassion. Joy is very, very pleasant, very, very pleasant, a wonderful, happy feeling. And yet it's accompanied by such equanimity that it doesn't make your mind move at all. It can be an interesting paradox, the amount of joy that is present and how little it seems to bother you or you care about it. Another interesting thing to explore. Infinite consciousness, we may sometimes notice the spaciousness, but really we start to notice the arising and passing away of the sense doors more carefully. Again, it starts out very calm, but with time our insight, our seeing is very sharp. And we start seeing activity at the sense doors arise and pass away. Sometimes we see the sense doors stutter or little flashes. These are individual consciousnesses that we start to become aware of as they arise and pass away. Very quickly we start to notice. Sometimes this even gets tiresome, seeing the instability of our sense door operation. Seeing the arising and passing away of consciousnesses of our experience is one of the characteristics of our experience called impermanence. As we start to notice impermanence very clearly in infinite consciousness, well, it can be, again, a little, rather not see that, you know. This is getting tiresome, everything going away. When you start seeing impermanence, or any of the other three characteristics, they can be uncomfortable at first. As you understand them, though, they lead to a clear, free mind state. And so even though the up and down, the coming and going at first is unstable, uncomfortable, can even provoke fear. Not always, but it can. Impermanence can do that. Eventually, as we really understand it, it shows us the truth of anatta, of how things work. And by seeing how they work, we become free. Fear can arise in any stage of the meditation. Fear arises because something new is happening, or we think something new will be happening, and it feels threatening. None of it is. All of it is quite pleasant. But sometimes your mind can be like, oh my, this is real, huh? Really? Am I like that? Like that? And the fear comes up. It's talked about in the suttas that fear can happen. If you have fear, no big deal. The instructions are clear. It's just simply maintain your posture. Don't move. Don't react to the fear. Don't push it away. Don't run away. Don't try to fix it. And observe how it passes. Like everything. Don't force yourself to do the scary thing. It's okay. When you're feeling better, you can put your toe over the water, toe over the line, see what that's like. Oh, that's not so bad. No one's pushing you to do anything. You can sit and be happy in whatever level you want. And when you're ready, go to that place where you had fear. And all the time, when you do that, eventually it's like, no big deal. It's like, oh, that? Really? I thought that was a problem. It's just a transition of awareness where you weren't sure exactly what was going to be on the other side. And that was it. Well, on the other side was something pretty darn fun, usually, yeah. But mine's funny. So have a laugh with it, right, when it pulls tricks like that. It will pass. And the same thing is true when you're walking outside and it's dark and you get a little nervous. Well, keep walking. Don't give in. It will pass. When there's a monster under the bed, what do? Yeah, don't run away from it. Well, you do. Parents will come and make you look under the bed, right? Yeah. So just wait till you're calm. You look under the bed yourself. It'll be fine. Yeah. So as infinite consciousness progresses, it progresses into nothingness. Maybe those ups and downs change, and they get further and further apart, and you notice in between them is not much happening. Or maybe you'll notice the feeling of joy shift into equanimity, and mind becomes much more quiet, dark. Nothingness is a state where there's no external awareness, really. What's happening is mostly all mind-based. As you stay with the equanimity, which can be quite profound, but as an energy, as a meditation object, it can feel more subtle at first. We still radiate the subtle equanimity. When we radiate from our head, we don't push it or make it go out. We allow it to go out. We allow it to fall away from us. We allow it to go out. Equanimity, we do that with too. We allow it to go out. And in nothingness, we can observe subtle things. Subtle things arise and pass away, and we start seeing deep activity of mind that we couldn't see before. And this is a deep and subtle state that requires a subtle balance of energy to maintain. The deeper you go in jhanas, the more balance you need to maintain with your attention. In nothingness, if you have a little too much energy, things will speed up and you'll get restless and you'll be thrown out. A little too little energy and you'll drift off into dreams and forget what you're doing. You have very good mindfulness here, and so you have the ability to adjust the energy well. So when you notice you're maybe a little too much energy in nothingness, I'd encourage you to adjust your energy less than you thought you should, just a little bit, and sit back and watch what happens. See if that was enough, if things slow down, if you get more and more still and more clear. And after some seconds or minutes, and if you think you need to back off a little more, do. Just a little bit. But if not, you can stay right with equanimity. And as you go with these deeper states, it becomes easier to stay with your meditation, object of meditation longer, and becomes more and more comfortable and interesting to sit longer. You naturally want to sit an hour or more. Naturally be comfortable to sit longer. And as you think about sitting longer, let your curiosity and comfort guide you. And let your curiosity encourage you to sit longer. What will happen next? Don't force yourself to sit longer because you think if you only sit longer, something good will happen. It's interesting to sit longer. I think it's great to sit longer. However, it's not great to force yourself to sit longer and be restless and do something that is not easeful, right? So allow your curiosity and your comfort to allow you to sit longer and longer. And again, just explore it. What's it like to sit when you're in the Arupa Jhanas? What's it like to sit 15 minutes longer? What's that like? How'd it go? Great. Maybe be comfortable to sit even longer, maybe. Find out. After a while, the equanimity and radiating equanimity becomes too coarse. Radiating equanimity may cause tension and tightness to come up in your mind. You may push it out, and it may cause a little bit of headache. Or you may find that mind kind of collapses in on itself in some way. And when you try to go back to equanimity, it doesn't feel right. It's not what you want to be doing. You'd rather be still, observing mind. And when this transition starts to happen, allow it. Neither perception nor non-perception is a very diverse jhana. As it first starts to manifest, perception, as it talked about, is not really present. Perception is memory, perception is labeling. It starts to go away, and so you enter what appears to be a very dreamlike state. And you don't remember what happened there. Your perception is not working in the same way it normally does. And so when this first starts happening, you can get confused. Like, did I fall asleep? Did I get dull? What happened? But actually, you're very clear. And so as you enter that dreamlike, neither perception or non-perception state and come out of it again, just 6R, the things that you remember when you reflect back. In that state, you can't really 6R. There's not enough there to actually 6R. You end up going in, perception's not really there at first. And you reflect as you come out and you 6R. As you do this, more and more mind goes deeper and gains more clarity and footing. And you enter what we can call quiet mind. Quiet mind is when mind is very still, only taking itself as an object. Distractions come and go, but you can 6R them very easily. As you're in quiet mind, as you go deeper with this, the balance of energy gets even more and more subtle. So you have to apply less effort to it. And actually the 6Rs are too much here. If you do the full 6Rs, the full movement, it's going to be too much energy. So you end up just relaxing when you see it and getting rid of craving and letting go of craving. And remember, when you relax here, you're not trying to make the distraction go away. You see the vibration come up and pass. You see the thought, whatever it is, come up and pass. And you relax, and it continues to come up and pass. You're not pushing it away or trying to change it. But as it passes, it's stiller. It's more still after it's gone. When the small movements come up and you try to 6R and try to make them go away, that adds tension. Things speed up and it gets more restless. That means you're trying too hard and you're not relaxing. You're 6Ring or trying to control your experience in some way. It's no problem if things come up and go away. If they come up and go away and you don't relax, they'll pull you away into dreams. They'll pull you out of the jhana. But if they come up and you relax, they'll go away and you'll go deeper. Like that. There are other stages that are in neither perception or non-perception. With Kirsten and David and Delson working together, they've defined multiple stages of neither perception or non-perception so we can talk about them clearly. And there's a wonderful graph of these stages that to talk about. And you go through still mind, we can call it that. Or mind is even more quiet. Sometimes in still mind, it seems very ordinary. Nothing is happening. But you find yourself with, well, my mind is so normal right now. Everything is normal. Something's wrong. My meditation, I'm just going to get up. This isn't meditation anymore. Don't do that. Remember the map. Stay there. This very normal seeming mind, when you really look at it, it's still. How remarkable. Thoughts are not arising. You can effortlessly be still, even though it seems normal. Eventually, you may enter what we call the signless deliverance of mind. The signless is when you start letting go of everything, every sign that arises, and there's nothing there. Exquisite silence there. You're able to see the smallest movements arise and pass away. Sometimes it can be minutes with any kind of distraction arising. Minutes with nothing, sometimes. Eventually, as you pass through the signless, then you reach full stop. Nothing arises anymore, not even consciousness. This is the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness. Nirodha. You cannot enter Nirodha on purpose, not at first. And even when you know how to do it, you never enter it on purpose, you allow it to happen. Any intention, any longing will prevent it from happening. And don't worry, for most people it just happens and they're not expecting it, and that's why it can happen, is they're not expecting it. So if you're expecting it, you're safe. It's not going to happen. Don't worry. It's fine. In the cessation of perception and feeling, there's no perception. There's no time. There's no nothing. It's a complete blank. You might be aware of a little before it happens, and you're certainly aware of right after it happens, but there's nothing there. Not a memory, not even something. Frames missing. As you emerge from this, mind is incredibly purified. You've been letting go all of this time, and it's incredibly clear, and you can see precisely what happened. When you have let go of enough of your attachment, and you enter cessation of perception and feeling, and you emerge, when you emerge, you see the links of dependent origination. You see how your mind starts up. We'll talk about how dependent origination works precisely, but you see your mind starting up from absolute zero in each step of that. Right after you see that, you experience Nibbana. It spontaneously arises. And that persists for a period of time, and then you experience relief. and you're out, and joy and relief arises in your body and mind like never before. This is Sotapanna path, the first time you do that, the first stage of awakening. So after this, the joy and relief will persist intensely for a period of time, some days usually, before you become accustomed to it and it fades in the background. In reality, it never really goes away, but with Sotapanna path, it does really fade, and it's like that. But any of these attainments, they're permanent changes, and you will look back and be able to say, yes, that's happened. It's not a. It may be subtle at first, but it is a thing. After Sotapanna path, your perception and sense doors operate a little differently. Things can seem more clear at times, more hyperreal. Sounds, sights, colors brighter, and so on. And there's been a permanent change of mind. We talk about the stages of awakening in terms of the 10 fetters. The 10 fetters that you lose as you go through the stages. The 10 fetters are belief in a permanent self, doubt, reliance on rites and rituals, lust, aversion, desire for form, desire for formless, restlessness, conceit, and ignorance. So the first three are doubt. Doubt in, does this work? Does this path do something? Is this a way to realize Nibbana? Well, that's gone. You've seen it. I will say with the first time through with Sotapanna, the experience of Nibbana may be very brief, and many people do not notice the links of dependent origination the first time. These are things you can reflect upon and will remember and will be familiar with time, but sometimes the first time through, you're not exactly sure what that was. These are entirely new experiences, and that's understandable, and they happen rather quickly. But you know this works. Belief in a permanent abiding self is gone. You've seen how it starts up. At least part of your mind knows it's all about causes and conditions. And every part of your mind is an example of causes of conditions that arises. And this is not the sense of I am, though. The I am sense is in conceit. And that is not fully gone until the end of the path. But we know there's no abiding self. Sometimes we find out we know this as we reflect, and how we think about things is different afterwards. And then belief in rites and rituals, that rites and rituals will take us through the path. We just know how this works. This is a process of observation. That's what happened. Nibbana happened, and it led to a change, and you entered it through this path. By the way, one can enter this in any jhana at all. It doesn't have to be the signless. It's most common where people will go up through neither perception or non-perception and then enter cessation through there. But you can enter to any jhana. Sometimes people do the first time in any jhana, lower jhana. So it can happen at any time. Can't expect it though, like that. But so the other interesting that happens in the first path is your sila becomes consummate. That is, you don't break your sila anymore. You don't want to. That burner is something you do not want to touch. You do not want to lie. Yikes. You do not want to harm things. It doesn't even make sense. And this happens despite what you've been told. I've had students that have had this stage, and they really didn't have a lot of understanding of sila. They were very good people, obviously, and very moral people, but they didn't, they, for whatever reason, had picked up this idea that maybe they had this kind of behavior change. And as we're talking, they stopped killing bugs and won't do these certain things. Just really harsh speech is something they won't do anymore just automatically. So that happens. How remarkable. But this is the first time through. There is path, and then there is fruition. And so, no matter how happy and talkative and wanting to hang out you are feeling, at that point, you should go sit, because there is more work to do. When this happens again, and by the way, after this happens, your mind is uniquely situated to do it again, to allow it to happen again. You just have a lot of energy, and you have to back off a little bit and allow it to happen. When it happens again, it kind of really reinforces the attainment, and you won't lose the attainment. Until the second time, until the fruition, there's a possibility that it could go away. I have never heard of this happening before at all, but theoretically it could go. So by breaking precepts or really, really big disturbance of mind, theoretically. So just be careful until the fruition. I mean, I don't think it's really anything to worry about. As I said, I've never heard of it happening. But be careful until it does, the second time. And so then Saktagami and path and fruit is next. As you do this, there's a temptation just to do that again. Just work up your mind and try to do the Saktagami, or the Sotapanna thing again. And bad news is you may be able to enter the Sotapanna path of fruition moment in a way and have the same kind of feeling, but it won't be as transformative until you do the work of letting go of the attachment. So you can work up and kind of have the setup the same, and it'll happen, and you'll get a little bit of relief and joy, but it's not the transformation. So you end up back to work, going through the jhanas, letting go of attachment. Some people it's very quickly, and sometimes it takes more time for other people. Doesn't matter. Until the Saktagami path happens. At that point, you have a reduction of lust and aversion, a great reduction of lust and aversion. This means you get irritated less, anger manifests less. Still get mad at this point, but it comes up and goes away much quicker. You're much more pleasant. You're not craving and lusting after foods or sensory experiences. You still like things. Still like pizza if you like pizza, and maybe don't like lima beans if you don't like lima beans. That's fine. But is it an emergency or not? No. And then keep working until you have anagami, path and fruit. At anagami, lust and aversion are completely eradicated, gone. At anagami is when mastery of cessation becomes possible. You enter cessation before that, but real mastery of cessation starts happening at that point. And then arahat, when you finally let go of it all. Now we talk about 8 path and fruit events, but it's not 8 times you enter cessation. It's not that simple, unfortunately. This takes time, and you can't make these things happen. Now, the arahat has let go of desire for form and formless, let go of restlessness. Imagine no restlessness in your mind. Let go of conceit, and let go of any kind of ignorance. So mindfulness is perfect. Mind knows what arises, no distraction at all. No lust, aversion at all. Fully present. Very pure mind. Now, in the suttas, there is no example of arahats that are not in the Sangha. So arahatship, lay people who enter arahatship in the suttas do enter the Sangha. And so this can be another source of fear for people. It's like, oh no, what if I become an arahat and have to become a monk? I'm not kidding. Like this, your mind will do things like that. Don't worry. It's not on the table. If you have any attachment to anything at all, you're not going to become an arahat. And these things do not happen without your consent. These are things you choose to do. It's not a fear. It's okay. I say that because I've talked to a lot of people, and sooner or later that thought occurs to people. It's all fine. So you're not going to accidentally become an arahat unless you're actually ready to be an arahat. Yeah. So this is the path. All of these stages are available. Some of this stuff may sound far out, but it happens. Anyone who is able to enter a jhana anytime is said to be capable of awakening of some degree. So, no matter where you're at, it can be possible. So do you have any questions? Yes?
I've seen that...
Hold on. You need a mic.
Need a mic. Uh-huh. Oh.
Yeah. You can just sit down. Okay.
Thanks. I've experienced myself that smiling is important for this.
Yes.
Well, what I'm curious about is as you go up into those higher jhanas, like you were describing dreamlike states or just like super relaxation, is there smiling going on during all that?
Well, there are stages in either perception or non-perception where you may not have a lot of perception of what's happening, and the smile may go away for periods of time. That can happen. But that's about it. And you can smile through most everything else like that, and it's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Who else?
Any other questions?
You're a pro.
Thank you for the thank you for that talk. Can people backslide in the jhanas? Like if they're in, quiet mind and maybe they got distracted and they quote unquote go down to infinite consciousness, and then when they pull it together again, they go back into quiet mind, or they fall back out down to they're kind of up and down the jhanas depending on how collected they're able to maintain their minds.
Well, I suppose that kind of thing can happen, and you can, when you have a distraction, you can fall out of jhana pretty quickly. Yep. Sure.
I mean, like, do you fall out into a jhana below, or you fall out all jhanas completely?
I think you would technically quickly fall out of all jhanas quickly, and then come back into one, like that. But that would happen so quickly. It would, yeah.
The talking stick?
Talking stick.
No?
Oh.
Going once. Oh, there we go.
This may be way too basic, but
Oh no.
just in the simplest terms, what would you say an awakening would be?
Well, what awakening is?
Right. I mean, all these different layers and levels and everything.
Well, yeah, you're ultimately letting go of defilements of mind, parts of mind that are kind of extra and problematic. David has a really excellent description of awakening in his podcast, in the podcast on Guru Viking. It's like a return to sanity. You get more and more sane. So it's not something wacky. It's like you're just letting go of your hang-ups and things that interfere with clear seeing, like that. So, yeah.
Okay, here's a question from the group here. Couple things here. The first one is, are the 10 fetters related to the 5 hindrances as they seem to be related? or are the fetters more of an indication as to one's progress on the path?
I think the latter is more like it. Clearly, restlessness is one of the higher fetters, and that is also a hindrance. But yeah.
Okay. The other one is, what would you suggest for someone stuck in infinite space? Thanks for the talk.
Have fun.
Yeah, right.
Enjoy it.
It's really pleasant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can play around with infinite space. You can expand it and play around with expanding to the world and beyond, like that. And sometimes we are find ourselves in jhanas for periods of time and kind of stuck. You make a quick amount of progress, and then you're there. And it really takes sharpening of the faculties and development of the faculties and balancing the enlightenment factors until you move past that. So that's not uncommon, where people make progress quickly to a place and all of a sudden they have to do some work to move past it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, anything? Yeah.
Just to pick up a little bit on the previous question. So isn't framing the experience as being stuck also part of the challenge? Because that kind of implies a kind of craving to keep moving forward and doing all these things, as opposed to,
Yeah.
I'm at this level of understanding, or this is where the meditation's at, which is different than I'm stuck.
That's a really good way to say that, and a good insight. Exactly like that. So lightening up, having more fun with it, not being worried about being in that stage is going to help one move past it. So very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's share some merit. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.